cost. And then not the one that does compression.
Told them not to shock,
Yeah,
which means I didn't have a rhythm.
right. Because there was nothing.
You have a bad rhythm, then it shocks.
Then they shock.
Then it shocks
But
you.
if there's
have
no
no rhythm,
rhythm,
they
then
don't
they
shock.
just do CPR.
They don't, huh?
Not sure which one we have.
Ooh.
So she
Oh
kept
my
putting that
gosh.
thing on, hoping she could shock.
Have
me.
you
She
had
kept saying,
COVID?
"Don't
Have
shock
you
me."
had COVID recently?
No, I had it a year ago.
So she had it there at the house?
The policeman.
No,
had
when
it.
they brought it with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
The
gosh.
policeman had it.
Holy cow. I cannot top that
Well,
with
we
my
have one
sniffles.
in the copy room here.
My,
So
do you? Oh, yeah, Jeff,
Yeah.
my husband was, sorry, not you, Jeff. My husband was asking, does the city have one? And we should check, like, do the church houses have them? Do the schools? Like, most of them do, you know, and we've been looking for them. Now that I know about them, I'm like, oh, there's one in the airport. There's one there, but that's insane. Okay. Wow. Yeah, seriously. Seriously. Well, the question is, what is he going to do with the rest of his life? Something's going to happen here.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, sorry, no pressure.
No pressure.
Oh, well, let me open this up and we probably need to get started. It is like Alpine wireless with a
with an at sign.
apostrophe, no, A exclamation point, PINE.
It's the at sign is for the A.
Oh, that's right. The at signs for the A.
And then
P
what is it? L,
A L P
P, and then the I is an exclamation point.
I is an exclamation point. E, and then is it wireless?
And then it's just, yeah,
Yeah, mine just fell out.
Alpine
Is that- let me
wireless.
see how you wrote it.
So you just have to remember those two funky symbols.
But you have this,
So.
Alpine is A L. Oh, yeah, you got the L, that's the I, right? Yeah, yeah. I'm like, what
Got
is
it?
Yep, we got it. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna start recorder.
No,
here in
so
a
Alan
second.
is ill. He's got COVID and he feels too sick to join the meeting. Okay. Awesome. And I don't have my, oh, here, thank you, because I don't have my computer on. Okay, let's go ahead and start. We want to welcome everyone to the Alpine City Planning Commission meeting of Tuesday, January 18th, 2021. And John McKay will give our opening prayer, and then I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance in the absence of Alan McDonald.
Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful this evening to be gathered together in the capacity of a planning commission meeting for the city of Alpine. We ask thy blessings to be with us as we discuss important issues that we need to address, and we might have clear minds and ideas as to how to best approach them. We're grateful for opportunities to serve. We're grateful for this great land in which we live. We pray a blessing upon us, that we might be safe from the influences of this pandemic and the challenges which it creates. We're grateful for these things and pray for them now in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I did forget to do the roll call in the beginning, so I'll go ahead and do that now. So we want to welcome tonight from Planning Commission, Troy Slade, Ethan Allen, John McKay, Jeff Davis, and myself, Jane Greiner. And then from the city, we have Austin Roy, the city planner, and Marla Fox is recording for us. Do we have Jed? Yeah, and Jed Milstein,
Yeah.
the city engineer, is on a Zoom call with us. So thank you everyone for being here. We'll start the meeting with public comment. Anyone who wishes to comment on an item not on the agenda can bring that up now. So does anyone here, even amongst us, have something that they wanted to bring up that's not on the agenda and it's not considered communication? Okay, so we'll move on to our action items tonight. We just have one action item. That's the height and grading requirements. And this is something we've talked about before. So Austin or Jed, who will be introducing this?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take it, and then
Okay.
Jed can fill in the
All right.
gaps.
Is your microphone on?
It is.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
It's not coming out of the
It's
ceiling,
not,
but
so that's
Jed, can
okay.
you hear us online, hopefully?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so if we'll just go ahead and, so this item, I'll just go back to the cover sheet here. So heightened grading, we've discussed this a couple times before at least. And the last time that we discussed it here in Planning Commission, the Planning Commission decided to table this. There was some discussion on, Bountiful City specifically. What is it that they do? And so they had a requirement that they only allow 10 feet of fill. And so we went ahead and did a little extra research into what Bountiful City is doing. I contacted their planner and engineer and also kind of dug into their ordinance. And these are some of the findings that we found. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of the highlight stuff. Each one of you should have a copy of this in front of you. And so we'll just kind of go through the highlights here. So first of all, Bountiful City requires a minimum buildable area. Any lot or parcel designated or zoned for residential development shall have a rectangular buildable area with a length and width ratio between 2:1 and 1:2. And then it goes on to say that that is located entirely on ground of less than 30% slope. And then they have minimum square footage requirements. So when you see here in their ordinance, when they refer to RF, that's referring to their foothill overlay zone, which is kind of their hillside area. And so you can see, that they have different requirements depending on which specific.
Do we
zone
have
you're
a
in.
zone similar to that? Would you be calling that the sensitive zone, or do we? I don't know that we have a foothill related zone. Only.
Yeah, we don't have anything called the
sensitive
foothill
wildlife.
zone, but we do have the sensitive lands.
Mhm.
And then within the sensitive lands, we have we do have like a hillside area.
But it's not called. It's not a zone, is it?
No,
is it
it's not a
actually an
zone.
overlay?
So it'd work kind of similar to like if you're in a rock fall area,
Okay.
it's kind of similar to that. But in this
Or a
case, it's
floodplain
anything over the elevation of 5350. And you can
Okay.
correct me if I got that number wrong, Jed. But anything above that elevation has to meet, more
Additional-
specific lighting requirements, more specific.
What do we call that area?
Let's see, it's called the hillside, and we don't refer to it quite very often. So let me just.
No,
pull
we
it up.
don't.
The hillside protection overlay.
Okay.
Hillside
That
protection
sounds
overlay.
familiar.
There's the
Okay,
term that
there
I
we go.
was.
Hillside protection
Yeah.
overlay. Thank you. Okay.
So the hillside protection overlay is kind of, we do have something kind of similar, I guess, in a way.
Mhm.
Continuing on to the next page, and we'll just get that on the screen here too for those online. Yeah, they go on to highlight here, driveway slopes shall have a minimum slope of 2% and a maximum slope of 15% as measured along the center line of the driveway.
Mhm.
The maximum grade of the driveway shall be 7%.
How does that compare to what we have?
Hey, Austin, on that one, that 7% is actually falls under item D. That is when you have a reverse grade driveway, or that's when your driveway or your house is set below the road.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
And-
yeah, downhill or reverse. Okay, so
Yeah,
that's. Okay,
how
go ahead.
that ours just says 12% and doesn't really go into any further detail.
Do we have a minimum so
No,
that it flows away from the house?
nope.
Yeah, ours is a lot more basic than theirs,
Okay, so ours is 12%.
but ours is
We don't
12%
have a
and theirs
minimum.
is 15. So
Okay. Man, I swear I've seen driveways with a lot steeper slope than that.
they do allow a bit steeper. Okay. I'm gonna skip now to the next, I guess it's the
Wait,
next couple pages.
before you go on, would you mind, so if the lot is below the grade of the road,
Mhm.
then they do have a maximum, so it can't be too steep down. So that kind of addresses the same thing. So
Yeah.
this C is addressing an upward grade, D is addressing a downward grade.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad Jed looked at this because I didn't
Uh-huh.
realize that was,
Yeah,
the
downhill or
downhill.
reverse grade.
yeah. Interesting.
A downhill grade would be a lot more problematic. to
For the
homeowner.
individual, for the
Right.
homeowner, yeah.
Right.
And so that's something that would have to be more, I would think we would want to review. more
Well,
carefully.
this says that they have to, the engineer has to approve
Prove
it.
Yeah.
So, okay. I just wanted to point that
Yeah,
out.
and it is interesting that throughout this whole thing here, their whole foot side overlay, a lot of it has to go through engineering review. So
Right.
he reviews all of these little details.
One other question I had is, do we have any ordinance that regards a downhill driveway?
I don't believe we do we, Jed?
Not that I'm aware of.
Does the 12% slope still apply?
Yep.
Okay, so like the ones at Fort Canyon where they go down off the road, those should have a 12% slope to the house.
Those were probably all built before our ordinance, but
Yeah, I've seen a lot of new ones going in though. Or they demolished the old one, who knows?
yeah,
Okay, but
Yeah.
either way, if someone technically wanted to do that in Alpine, it could have a 12% slope going down.
yep.
Okay,
Mhm. Okay. All right, so if we don't have anything else on that page, I'll just skip ahead to the next highlights. And this section is referring to grading cuts and fills in their foothill overlay zone. So the first one that I wanted to highlight here is number 1, exposed unstable surfaces of an excavation or fill shall not be steeper than a 1 to 2,
mhm,
1 vertical to 2 horizontal. So this 1 to 2, when I spoke with the engineer and with the city planner, they said this is kind of their big point that they hammer home on everything.
mhm. Is this like a 30-60? I'm trying to picture the triangle here. If it's 1 to 2, it's a 30%.
Percentage wise,
Well,
yeah,
What kind of a, okay. I'm just thinking of a 2 to 2 over, 1 up.
Does that mean 2 feet in, 1 foot up, 2 feet in? Is that kind
it
of?
means, yeah, so for
Yeah.
every foot down or of elevation gain or
Uh-huh,
drop,
Mhm.
you have to go 2 feet horizontally
uh-huh.
before you can drop
Okay.
another foot, if that makes sense, kind of
Yeah.
yeah. So that's really a big limiting factor on how they kind of regulate height and grading
Uh-huh.
in their foothill zone. Moving on to number 4 here. So the top or bottom edges of slopes caused by an excavation or fill up to 10 vertical feet shall be at least 3 horizontal feet from the property line and or street right-of-way lines. Cuts and or fills greater than 10 feet shall be set back an appropriate distance as determined by the city engineer.
Okay.
So, reading this here, it looks like Jed's more the expert on this, but reading this, it sounds like they're not allowing, large cuts
Right.
or near the property line. You have to have at least a minimum distance.
Right.
I can't remember the offending house that kind of brought this issue to our attention, the one with all the garages. Did it have a sheer face to it that this ordinance would have addressed?
I thought this was more because of that big barn.
Yeah.
The big barn
Well,
overrun.
We've had yes, I would say our 2 instances that have kind of brought this to our attention are the big barn, but there is the house with the garages. There was an issue on that, like, because some people question, how could they bring in so much fill to raise that house?
But
or
was
the
it set
garage above
back?
the street?
Was it set back as far as what this ordinance would require?
In that instance, so that one they were bringing in fill, and they were, it's a gradual slope, but the structure itself is set back 30 feet from the front property line. As far as
So they didn't have any retaining walls that
that one didn't have any retaining walls. It was really just, and it honestly, if you go to some of our hillside areas, what they did there man-made wouldn't seem so extreme in a natural, in a more natural area where the lot just kind of naturally goes up.
Right.
Wouldn't seem that far out of place.
Do you
But
know how much
because-
he had to raise the barn from one end to the other?
The barn what they did on that one is,
Because
so
it's level at one end and.
it is level at one end, and they didn't bring in a lot of fill on the north end of the lot, but
Right,
towards the south, because of just how long the barn is,
right.
they had to start bringing in more and more fill towards the south to raise it up to
Yeah.
the same height as it is in the north.
Is it,
And so
do you
the-
think it's more than 10 feet?
Yeah, because they have 2 retaining walls. And maybe Jed can remember the height of those retaining walls, but it's quite a bit more than 10 feet.
I think it's 12 to 15 total, and they did dig the north end in a little bit.
So they
it's,
did.
yeah, it's not like they just set the elevation at existing grade on the north end and then just filled it out from there southward. They did dig the north end in. I don't know how much, but I know they dug it in a little bit.
Okay.
So they dug it in, and a good thing to look at on that too is because it was just a large piece of property. It looks a lot more extreme. Like if they would have done that on a smaller scale, if you kind of shrunk it down to like a
Mhm.
1 acre lot,
Yeah.
what they did wouldn't seem that
It would have been fine,
outlandish,
yeah.
right? But
Mhm.
because it's on such a large scale, it just looks more.
Sure.
You notice it more.
It
Yeah, 'cause it's just
accentuated
the
everything.
sheer
Everything
scale of it.
grew.
Yeah, but in effect, it made it worse. If it had been smaller, we wouldn't have bothered. It wouldn't
I
have
don't know
probably
about worse.
offended
It
as
made
many
it
people.
bigger.
Made
It made
bigger.
it higher.
Well, and
I
the
think
thing
it
is,
caused more disruption to the
Well,
neighbors.
sure.
Because it was big.
Right.
Yeah.
than because
But
it
part
was
of that is also because it goes
Yeah.
between every sight line of the
Of all the
of the
houses.
property
Of
and
all the
everything like that.
houses.
So there's multiple things that made it so bothersome to
it
everyone.
spans probably at least 3 lots, I think,
Right.
on the
Yeah.
neighboring,
Right.
Yeah,
in the neighboring homes.
right. So, but if you'd have had a limitation of 10 feet, he would have had to shorten it. He would have had to lower it. He would have had to done something to change that.
Yeah, how much?
You probably would have had to position it differently on the lot, I would imagine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Instead of going north, south, he would have had to figure out more of an
Mhm.
east-west
Go down by
alignment
the
for
other
the
street.
structure, I would think. That goes more along with the natural contours of the land.
Mhm.
Okay, so number
Which is
5 here
better,
says,
Yeah.
let's see, the maximum vertical height of any cut or fill shall be 10 feet except for existing naturally occurring or man-made site anomalies. And so that's where we got that, where we would have discussed that last time, the 10 feet
Mhm.
cut and fill.
It's kind of funny because it says naturally occurring and or man-made site anomalies. I guess that means pre-existing site anomalies, because
Yeah.
otherwise you could man-make anything you want.
I think they just try to quantify it as being something less than 10% of the
Sure.
parcel, so.
Yeah, that's probably
Mhm.
true. And like the subdivision itself or the streets or things like that could have caused some of them.
Yeah, and it's important to read that the end of that there, which John was pointing out, the 10% of the entire parcel area or 1,000
Right.
square feet, whichever is less.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think
Okay.
that's an important one that
Mhm.
really kind of, that they use in their city. Let's see, scrolling on, moving down here to number 8. Yeah. Okay.
The setback being determined by the city engineer. What's gonna be controlling?
Hey, Jeff, could you turn your mic on? I can't hear you.
Yeah, that's sorry, Jed.
Thank-
Just back on 4. What would be the controlling criteria that you would use, assuming we had this language that
As determined.
the city engineer would determine what that appropriate distance would be?
So let me read that again. The top or bottom edges of slopes caused by an excavation or fill up to 10 vertical feet shall be at least 3 horizontal feet from the property line and or. Okay, so essentially they're just saying you can't put a 10-foot cut or fill within 3 feet of the property line. And then further up there, it is on item 1, it essentially says if you are going to do a 10-foot fill, you're going to have to slope up to that point. You can't just have, unless you have a retaining wall, which is number 9. You can't just 10-foot vertical within that distance of the property line.
But
So-
Jed, read the last sentence there on 4.
Cuts or fills greater than 10 feet shall be set back an appropriate distance.
As
So,
determined by the city engineer. So Jeff is saying there's no criteria for what the city engineer uses to decide that. So there are several sentences in here like that I've noticed that say as decided by.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems
Or
to
as
give a lot of
determined by-
discretion to the engineer.
So it's just your discretion, or what do you think on that they would be doing?
I think that poor city engineer has to make all these decisions with no criteria, so he's gonna get critiqued left and right.
I guess that was my point, Judd.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we don't want things like that.
Jed would
So I-
not want an ordinance
it's-
like that.
I mean, if this our ordinance, I would want whatever somebody is proposing backed up by geotechnical studies or retaining wall studies, basically anything that says or proves that what they're proposing is going to be safe and not cause any kind of hardship or hazard to their neighbors.
Good call.
So, well, when I thought about that, I was thinking on a one that you're filling, that makes sense. One that you're cutting, that makes sense. But if
Mhm.
you're filling, you would want to fill right to the street. Right? You're not going to fill 3 feet from you're going right to the street. You want to be level with the street.
Right, but it's saying
Yeah.
it has to be level for at least 3 feet before the slope starts. Like you can't
Right.
have it come straight up.
But if you had a steep hill,
Mm.
you're going to want to level it right to the street. You don't want it to start 3 feet in. You don't want to have it dip down.
Yeah, have a weird
Right.
dip on the front of your
Yeah.
property, yeah.
You'd have to have some kind of rock or something, otherwise it's gonna.
Slough and,
It's
yeah.
gonna
Wash in.
go
Wash.
wash down anyways.
Yes, you actually want to raise it above the street to wash and to
Yeah.
slope out. So to
So-
me, that property, that language works on one side of the street and it doesn't work on the other side of the street.
Yeah, it doesn't work very well for the uphill side of the road.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to number 8 here. No cut, fill, or other area of disturbance may have a finished grade exceeding 2 horizontal feet for every 1 vertical, a 2-to-1 slope. Retaining
Mhm.
walls shall be required in any area of disturbance where the grade exceeds a 2-to-1 slope.
That's actually, we have that same language in our ordinance.
Do we?
We just don't have the limitation of 10 feet.
Okay.
So is this saying if no cut or fill can have a finished grade of anything more than the 2-to-1, but retaining walls are required where an area of disturbance exceeds it? They just said it can't exceed this, and if it does, there's a retaining wall. So does that mean if it already existed on the slope, on the lot?
Well, take Three Falls is always a great example, right?
Yeah,
So take their secondary access road, for example. So they go put that road in there. Our ordinance says either you have a 2-to-1 cut slope minimum or maximum, actually, that would be the maximum steepness, or you put in a retaining wall. In their situation, if they would have gone with the 2-to-1 minimum, it would have completely wiped out the entire mountainside because you couldn't catch grade until you crested out at the top of the ridge.
right.
Yeah.
So
So
that's,
I see what you're
that's-
saying. So there's really an or between these.
yeah,
Because it sounds like you can do this and you can do that, and they contradict each other, but that makes sense then that they can do that, or they can have a retaining wall if that's not possible, or if it's to the advantage of the city or whatever.
yep.
Okay,
Then number 9 just says, if you're gonna have a retaining wall, you can't have one that's taller than 10 feet. I thought that statement's interesting because it doesn't say you can't have 2 retaining walls or 3 or 4. It doesn't say you can't tier them. It just says no retaining wall can exceed 10 feet.
Yeah, they do have that, any retaining wall that's 4 feet should be done by an engineer. But they don't have, I wonder if they have another ordinance about retaining walls, multiple retaining walls like ours is in a separate place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have 9 feet, don't we?
Yeah.
What's ours?
Well, you can actually go up to 18 feet.
Well,
But it has
ours
to be combined.
is 9 per single wall,
Yeah,
but
what's the single wall height limit?
9 feet. But
Okay,
you
that's what I thought.
so our ordinance is a little more specific. You can put them in sets of tiers, so you could have 2 9s together, which equals 18. But then you could offset it 9 feet and have another 18 and just keep doing that and doing
Right.
that if you needed to.
Right. Okay. I just want to kind of compare.
Yeah.
Thanks.
This is interesting though. So it's like they could just have unending, unless there's another section that we don't. know
Right.
about.
That's the thing is there could be a section
Unending
on
sections of
specifically
10-foot
retaining walls or
Tiered
something.
walls, one after
Mhm.
the other.
Yeah, I think our retaining wall ordinance addresses that
It does.
pretty well. We don't need to include that here. But I like the idea that they limit the amount of fill to 10 feet.
Mhm.
That kind of closes things down. I think that's the main point we're missing in our
So-
ordinance.
Are we talking about roads or are we talking about houses?
I think it's the home site. We're talking about the
Yeah, not
measure,
roads.
we're trying to establish, the height of a building, right?
Yeah, and I don't,
Establish the height that we
And I
begin, the point at which we begin measuring the height.
yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that Bountiful's ordinance is clearly specifying the difference between the two.
Uh-huh. So what do we have, like, if someone comes in to develop a subdivision and they choose to just raise the road up, what are
Well,
our restrictions that cause
perhaps-
that?
Perhaps the section E here, it does mention streets, roadways, and private access ways. So I'm wondering if you dig further down into here, if that
Says they shall follow
starts
the
to talk about
natural
more about
terrain.
streets rather than the
Mhm.
lots themselves.
Okay.
Well, and I know our like ordinance has limitations on grade and lots of things as
Yeah,
far
I
as the
was
roads
just
go.
curious what our ordinance is, just a general summary of what they are.
And when there's a subdivision, we get to approve that, right?
Mhm.
So,
And is
Yeah.
most of our street stuff based on ASHTO kind of guidelines, Jed, or?
Yeah. So I mean, that's a whole different subject, but if you want to just briefly go over it, you could go look at our section, our design standards in section 407, I believe it is, but I mean,
I don't
In a-
think we need to look at streets. I think we're really focused on the lot.
that's
Yeah.
what I was into.
So my question, well, go ahead and finish, then I'll bring up my question.
Okay, well, I think that might actually be our last highlighted section here.
Mhm.
So the rest of this goes on to talk about fences and walls. And they do have some interesting ways that they
Mhm.
regulate those. But I don't think that necessarily has to deal with the height of the home. And so I don't know
Mhm.
if we want to look at that too closely. So,
Yeah, then you highlighted on page 24.
Oh. yeah, there is one last one, which is, they have a specific section that talks about retaining walls.
Yeah.
And really, it's just kind of reiterating what they already said up above, but any
Mhm.
wall that's over 4 feet tall requires engineering. All retaining walls have to get signed off and inspected by the city. And, we kind of do something, we do similar here in Alpine. So we have a
Mhm.
retaining wall process and Jed is responsible for, approving those.
Mhm.
Hey, you have to sign off too.
That's true. I did sign off on those.
You're not sneaking out of that one.
I
Okay.
can't, yeah, yep, so it goes through planning and zoning and
Yeah.
engineering. We do look at all retaining walls and
Okay. Well, thanks. That was a great amount of a good job on the research and explanation of kind of comparing what another city is doing. One of the things that I wanted to do, and maybe you guys have some ideas of other ways to look at it too, but as I had mentioned before, and I've kind of like drawn out trying to think here on my paper, but the three situations you have are a lot that slopes from the front where the sidewalk is to the back.
Right.
A lot that slopes from the back to the front.
Right.
And a lot that slopes from side to side, and it could go either direction, side to side. So I was curious, like we've looked at maybe the 10 feet of fill and different things like that. Like if we applied their ordinances in those three situations to sort of see, like, what would that do to that type of a lot? How much would that help that situation? Or any other ideas we have. I just want us to, as we come up with our ideas, let's apply it to those three things and be like, okay, can we come up with one thing that applies to all three situations? If we can't, then we should actually create something with 3 bullet points, just depending on what type of lot it is. And say, okay, on a lot that is over 50% sloping from front to back, or you know what I mean? Something like that with actual parameters around it. So I just wanted to kind of start with that before we started giving ideas or seeing if we wanted to, you know, what we thought that was good we could pull out of this.
Okay, so just to clarify, so you're talking one scenario is you have a lot that's downhill from the road.
Right.
Option 2.
Slopes from the front of the
or
lot to the back. of the
Item
lot.
B would be an option or a lot that's above the road.
Mhm.
And then
Slopes
C
toward the road.
would be a lot that spans, the road goes up
Yep.
from downhill to uphill across the front of the
Right,
lot.
exactly.
right?
So like the road, it may be at the road's edge, it may start here, but it slopes down from side to side.
Okay.
Like Carla Merrill's
Carla's
house.
right?
Exactly.
The
Hers
mayor's
is a
house.
perfect
They're gonna wanna-
example.
The person with that's gonna wanna fill that side. make
To
their
a
house
certain, to a
flat,
certain point,
right?
but they
They're
gotta
gonna-
make their
they're-
house
They might
flat.
excavate this side, they might.
They
fill
might
this
want a
side,
walkout basement,
But yeah, they're
or
gonna.
what
do
if
So,
somebody didn't?
could
Could they
they-
build it clear up on the one side?
Right.
They could cut on the right, on the uphill side, they could cut 10 feet. And the downhill side, they could fill 10
If it was
feet,
above,
right?
right, yeah, if it was above.
Depending
so,
on,
Yeah,
yeah.
it depends. So anyway, that's kind of what I want to use as our criteria to think about it, so.
Does it really matter on the down sloping lots? Aren't we trying to manage protruding heights?
Yeah.
Well, on the down sloping lots, we don't want to restrict them. If you have a downward sloping lot and say, like I bought a lot once over on Eastview Drive. And like, here's the sidewalk and it went out about a foot and dropped. So if somebody did that, you've got to be able to fill that in. And so for me to get 30 feet back from the street and be at road level to my front door, I had to bring in a lot more than, I may have to bring in a lot more than 10 feet of fill. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you're basically.
Because I
building in
don't
a-
want,
in a hole.
yeah, I don't want my driveway going down. So I'm basically, here's the road, here's a hole, that's my lot. And I've got to build it up to where I can put my house straight out and then fine, I can have a walkout basement.
Right.
And ours was so far down, I had to do 10-foot basement ceilings so that we were down on natural, you know, on
Undisturbed.
original soil to put the foundation. So you get an example like that and you can't restrict. That's why I'm saying that almost more than 10 feet of fill, you should say you cannot raise the lot to more than street level
Yeah.
at the front. Do you see what I'm saying?
I mean, the counterpoint to that is, so if you think about over here on the east side, I don't know how many of you are familiar with like Preston Drive,
Mm-hmm.
but the counterpoint to that is if you're on the downhill from that
Mhm.
neighbor, so you look up at the hillside
Mhm.
and this house is gonna be, you know what the lot looks like, but now all of a sudden he wants to bring in 30 feet of,
Just to bring it to
Builder.
street level.
just to bring it to street level, but now that lot that's up above you that you look out through your back window
Mhm.
is now gonna be 30 feet
It's not
taller
Big tall.
before they even
Yeah.
start building the house.
Sure, but their backyard won't be.
So,
Like,
I mean, that's
you-
something to
I
think about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's unwise to require someone to build their home below street grade. In my opinion, that is asking someone to set their house up for a flood. Like, I don't think in our city we should ever require that unless it's something like a huge area, like maybe at Fort Canyon, like where they're coming off the street and winding down, but that's not like a neighborhood. So I don't know.
So our ordinance doesn't require them to build anywhere, really. I mean, that it's based off of finished grade, so they have the option of, if they want to build low, they can build low. We're not
Right.
telling them they have to build low.
Right, but
Right.
yes, I'm just saying, let's not set this up so that there's no way that they can bring in enough dirt that they absolutely have to build below.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, and that's a good point. I mean, if you say you can only bring in 10
Right.
feet of fill and their lot's 40 feet below the street,
Right, that's my
you know,
point. So
then they're
see, like
still gonna be in
mine-
that hole.
Right, right. That's what I was saying, like in my
But I-
example,
But I still think he's right in a way though, because if it's that extreme, then it's causing a potential problem for the back neighbor.
on a half acre lot,
Yeah.
I don't think that's a potential problem for the back neighbor, in my opinion. I think
Because
that,
the back neighbor's gonna see this gigantic house.
Now there's just gonna be this big dirt fill before the house,
So,
and then the
well, they're
house
not
goes
gonna
on top
go,
of that.
well, I think you'd have to put some kind of restriction, like not out to the back of their property, but like to the front of the house and then X amount from there or something.
Yeah.
Don't these lots have to have designated buildable areas?
Only lots that have some kind of a natural hazard in them have designated buildable areas.
Okay. Otherwise, it's just the
Setback to setback.
the
It was
easements,
The setbacks.
right?
Um,
Yeah. But the size of the lot definitely comes into play, because like in my example, if somebody had 10 acres and that was the case,
Yeah.
okay, they need to build up their 12% grade driveway to get down to their 5, you know what I mean? But if you're on a half acre lot and the developer has been allowed to raise the street and then it drops down 10 feet, you know,
Yeah. No,
Did you say
I
that-
see what you're saying.
Did you say that we have the same ordinance of finished grade needs to be 2-to-1 ratio?
mhm.
No, the finished grade, that's actually for our roadway ordinances, for our roadway cut and fills. I don't know that we have anything. I'd have to look closer at our building permit. I don't recall our building permit requiring a 2-to-1 or lesser slope grade on the grading of the house.
This is very interesting that they have this rectangular buildable area. I mean, does that mean that within the center, even though it can have all kinds of weird pokey things around the edges? Do you know what I mean?
Pokey things.
Yeah.
It's just-
But you know, like a rectangular buildable area. Anyway,
yeah, I wonder if that's just for the sake of calculation to make it
maybe
easier to.
so.
Well, I think what they're trying to get away with there, or come away with there, is when you're trying to design lots and design areas to put homes, you're restricted to, in Alpine, it's either 20 or 25% for a buildable area. And it also says you got to have a minimum area of 5,000 square feet. Well, if a developer comes in and says, hey, I've got 5,000 square feet, the dimensions are 1 by 5,000, you're not going to get a house on that.
Right.
Mm,
So I think the point is it has to be something that you could actually get a house on.
Okay.
that makes sense.
So item C doesn't do anything to help us with grade.
No.
So I was just saying, which of these things are something
Yeah,
that actually
that's-
helps with grade? Item C doesn't. If you look through the next page, driveways having a minimum slope of 2% and a maximum slope of 15%. Well, we already have 12 as our maximum. So shouldn't that help us with the amount of fill that can be brought in?
Yeah, because yes and no, I should say. If the buildable area or the house is going to be 30 feet away from the property line, where the majority of them are, not all of them, then that 12% is going to limit you. You've got 30 feet of 12%. That will set where your garage elevation is going to be. But if you have a lot that's 5 acres and you want to go 12% and build your house up on an artificial mountain,
Right.
there's really nothing that says you can't do that.
Okay. So,
But their 2-to-1 thing would help you with that.
yeah. Who is it that built Inherited Chills at the back of a cul-de-sac, and it goes straight up and
yeah.
around a corner and up again? It's kind of like a castle looking house. Like, I can't imagine those being 12% slope.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Do you know who
the
I
one you're
mean? I
talking
think
about.
they've
Like
had a couple builders and a
maybe.
couple,
Yeah,
where Hartley.
The
and-
Hartley
and
home.
Purcell.
no, not that one, but it's Inherited Chills in the first area.
Oh, the first area.
It's the one with the big, is it an indoor tennis court in the back?
Let me
That's
think,
one
let
I
me
was
think of
thinking
the
of.
name and then I'll do it,
Oh.
but I,
that's the one that the more
Right.
recent build.
Yeah.
I'll have
Yeah,
to,
it's
I'll have
probably the
to
one with
think
the
of it,
tennis
but
court.
I
Yeah, that
guess
one-
maybe
that's on like
12% is a
5
lot
acre
steeper.
lot, right? It's a big lot that it's on and it's way far away from the road. Is that the one? you're
No,
talking
no,
about?
this is a different one. I'll look up the address for you and show you what I'm talking about,
Okay.
but I guess maybe 12% is steeper than I think, but. Anyway, so the driveway slope should help with the fill, right? That should restrict the amount of fill someone can bring in.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I guess it's on you, Austin and Jed then, right? If the driveway just becomes a check. And then as long as they maintain that 12%, that fill has to meet that requirement. I
Correct.
guess the only exception is if it's a bigger lot,
we
then
have
that
that in the ordinance
12%
today.
goes for
Longer.
100 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, 12% in 100 feet is 12 feet. So 12% at 30 feet is 3.6 feet.
Oh, okay. So that's
Just-
really not much.
No.
No,
Okay.
So
Yeah.
my question is, why isn't this 12% slope on the driveway fixing the problem? Like, in what cases would someone's driveway meet the ordinance and we have someone who's building up their fill way high?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think it's perception. It's a perception that the house in that middle of that neighborhood has really built up the lot. I think it's perceived that way because the house is 2 to 3 times larger than every other house in the neighborhood.
Right,
And they had to fill up the whole lot to get it there. But in reality, on the back side of that lot where fill was brought in, it was 3 foot or less.
right.
So it's not that a lot of fill was brought in, it's just the perception of how large it is. And
Yeah,
Okay,
because we still have the 34 feet.
yeah,
right.
Yeah,
And-
once you get this done, you still have 34.
the house with the garage is one of the things that the design choices that they made on that house was on the front of it, they decided to go straight up to 34 feet, just on the, they didn't have any, so you know how a typical house will
Yeah.
have like a little roof that
It's
kind
like
of
a big
relieves.
wall.
It
Mhm.
comes off,
Roof
but
or
this
something.
is just a sheer wall on the front of it,
Yeah.
from the ground up to 34 feet tall,
Yeah.
right on the very front of the house. So there's no relief. There's no little
Yeah.
porch or something to kind of
Well,
break it up.
and
make
it
it
must have
simple.
been built later, because normally the CC and whatever, the CCNRs would not allow something like that. Was this built after the rest of the things or modified later?
Like my neighborhood doesn't have. CC.
It was an addition onto
No,
an
but
existing
most
house.
developments do now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was an addition onto an existing home. Yeah,
Yeah.
see, so then once the initial build is done, those CCNRs seem to have absolutely no bearing whatsoever.
Yeah, most neighborhoods, I mean, that neighborhood was probably 20 years when it was being
Yeah.
built. And then he had added on to it 15 to 20 years
Mhm.
after everybody else built their houses. So
Yeah,
the chances of that HOA and those CCNRs still
Right.
being in effect are probably
Pretty
pretty
rare.
slim.
yeah, unless you had some, like you said, an active HOA association or something like that associated with it, so. So I guess what my point here is,
Keep what we have.
Well, I'm wondering, like, are we chasing a ghost here when in reality, so like this one controls a ton of it. So then in addition to that, this 10 feet of fill, what would that do for us in addition to the driveway slope?
Oh, are you saying, are they conflicting?
No, I'm just saying, like, could we make our ordinance any better? Like right
we
now,
had it-
so we're being asked to look at this. So right now, we don't have this, we don't have a fill restriction on our ordinance right now. We have the driveway restriction, which seems to me like it would solve the majority of our problems. But if there are problems above and beyond that, would adding a fill restriction do us any good? I'm not saying it would or wouldn't. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, do you see any reason to add a fill restriction?
So, I mean, to me, the main time that you would come into the restriction is the place you don't want it. Is on the
Mhm.
downhill slope of a house.
Mhm,
That's where you're gonna bring in a lot of fill
mhm.
and.
That's where you're gonna want it to
Spot.
bring.
Spot, so that's gonna be the spot. I
Mhm.
don't think it's any other place.
Mhm.
Or where you're bringing in, otherwise, because if the other way, you're cutting,
Yeah.
you're cutting and leveling,
Right.
right?
So do we have any limitation on ours? Like, so one of the things they have is that you can't go right to the edge of your property. And I can, like, I built a pool in my backyard and I put a retaining wall right to the edge of my
When's the
property.
party? Oh,
Well,
I
I
don't,
did it
you
like
can't
10
put,
years ago.
yeah, but you can't put retaining walls right to the edge of your property now,
Okay.
correct?
I mean, I didn't
Well,
do,
No, you have
it
to
wasn't
have
as
the,
high, it was only like a 4-foot retaining wall,
Right.
so.
but
don't
I think
got
we wrote the
approval.
ordinance so that it has to be a minimum of so many feet back, remember? So that it didn't go straight from the retaining wall to the next person's property.
I don't
Jed?
think that is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we now have an ordinance that you have to get permission to build a retaining wall in an easement. And most properties have a public utility easement that goes around the
Mhm.
perimeter of the property.
Okay,
Your pool's probably on.
But
Probably
that
is.
being said, if you got a sign off from all of the utility companies,
then you could.
I can think of a couple properties where they literally did that. The back
Mhm.
property line is a retaining wall going into their neighbor.
And our retaining wall ordinance actually covers that situation specifically, saying if you create a drop off for your neighbor, you have to put a fence on top of your retaining wall.
Right.
Yeah,
So our ordinance actually does allow you to put it right on the property line,
yeah.
Okay.
which I don't think is a bad thing. It's just,
No, and well, we recently, the retaining wall ordinance is also only like, what, 3 years old or something?
I think it was actually 2016.
Wow, time flies when you're
6
having fun,
years.
right? Okay, the lot
Cool.
I'm thinking of is Deer Crest Lane, and I don't know that Google Maps has it. Yeah, look at Deer Crest Lane and look at, it's a cul-de-sac at the end of it. And, yes. It's right above like Will's farm that he's building, yeah.
Let's see, Google Maps is not.
I've
very
got it on
up to date. Let's
mine.
try the county map and see if that.
Yeah, I just did Google Maps, Deer Crest Lane, Alpine.
Well, when I go to the satellite image, it just
Oh, no, it has, my satellite image has it.
dirt road. Really?
Well, look it, here,
Let's try.
it's right there. See this driveway? It is insane. I don't know if you've driven up there.
Okay, so which home is it in Deer Crest Lane?
Deer Crest Lane, let me see if I can tell what the street.
It's Hartley's.
Yes, that's exactly who it is.
Okay.
I knew you would know the name.
Oh, I didn't.
Hartley's.
Yeah, that's the one that I
Sorry,
thought
I
it-
didn't
you were
hear you say
talking about. Yeah, it
Oh,
looks like a
Hartley's and
castle.
Oh, it's
Parcells.
Hartley's?
Oh, is Parcells right next to that? Oh, I thought
they-
Parcells was the next one up.
They've been at each other since because they
Oh,
had to,
okay,
because they had to put that big huge retaining. wall
right,
between
okay.
the
I
two.
was thinking that Parcells was over by the two new people, the doctor
No,
and, okay.
no.
But that.
The other influencer, her sister is the one who built the other house.
Is that
looked-
driveway 12%, Jed?
That
I
thing
think it
is
is.
insane.
Yeah, a matter of fact, I'm almost positive it is because I remember reviewing that one specifically.
Okay. See, I think like you said, perception, we have these things in here and they're actually meeting the ordinance. But we look at that and people are thinking, I want to restrict that, but literally that's a reasonable, if Bountiful allows 15, 12 certainly seems reasonable. And drop your little man in
Yeah,
there.
but
There you go. That's the one I'm talking about.
perception, if you're in the cul-de-sac, I mean, I can see how you could think that doesn't look like a 12%.
And it's also so long
Yeah.
that, you know, it just accentuates the height going on and on and on.
And that's probably why the only way they could make it work is because they had to make it so long. to
Probably, or
reach
they
the
could have done
12%.
their garage down at the bottom. Well, I don't know what's down at the bottom, but either way, it doesn't matter. Just, I'm just wanting to know about,
Yeah. So that retaining wall is pretty tall.
yeah. Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a
Okay.
pretty tall retaining wall there.
Yeah, I'm sure you're both very familiar with. Okay, so what's the thought? Like, if you guys tell me what you're thinking.
Well, if we maintain the ordinance as it's written now, at least with regard to, we're measuring from the average finished grade. Are we okay with leaving that language intact?
Okay, can we look at our language?
Honestly, I think it's the best language there is. Just from all the research we've done, that is what the majority of cities are doing it from.
Okay,
And I think it covers more well, how do I say this? I think it covers the broadest situations possible where you can keep a standard ordinance without trying to write a whole bunch of weird different ordinances for several different situations.
okay. I think we're past the point of doing something like Park City where people drive down into whatever the natural contour of the city or the land is, in my opinion. Does anybody else think we should change dramatically? And okay, so if that's the norm, and in all the research that we did, do most cities have a max fill?
No,
They
only
did.
That was just Bountiful.
Just Bountiful, right?
And that's why Bountiful is probably highlighted in the last discussion, is because they were unique in that regard.
Right. And
When you talk to their planner and engineers, did they discuss any of the grief or problems that they've either averted or caused by dealing with that issue?
That's a good question, Joe.
They didn't say, I mean, first of all, they said, look, Bountiful's really built out and we haven't had any stuff come through.
we haven't looked
that
at
we've had
this
to
for a
look at
long
this for a
time.
while. So, that was the first thing that they mentioned to me.
Mhm.
And they just said, our biggest thing is really that 2-to-1 slope thing. So as long as it's meeting that, I mean, the 10-foot thing doesn't really make a huge difference. I don't know. They didn't seem to emphasize that it was
Mhm.
like a big deal.
So Jed, will you clarify? I thought you said that we didn't have the 2-to-1 slope except for on the street grading.
Well, we require a grading and drainage plan for every house that comes into Alpine. Every one of them has to show us how they're going to retain a certain amount of water on site.
Mhm.
And any kind of stormwater plan is not going to allow you to have slopes that you can't revegetate, because then it becomes a SWIP issue. So in a roundabout way, yes, we do have that requirement, but it doesn't specifically come right out and say you can't have a steeper than a 2-to-1 finished slope on your house plans. But like I say, we do require a SWIP plan, which wouldn't allow it anyways.
Right,
Anything-
so the water
anything
can't run
further-
off your lot onto the next person's lot.
Yes and no. You can have a slope like a 3-to-1 or even a 2-to-1 slope. It gets a little complicated, but you can't have a steep slope running into your neighbor's property, correct? Because you have to be able to revegetate it so water can be retained on that slope.
Okay, and so you think that replaces the need for the 2-to-1?
If we wanted to put it in there, I would actually not say 2-to-1, I'd say 3-to-1, because if we're talking about fill slopes, any kind of a fill slope that you generate or you make,
Mm-hmm.
I'll say a man-made slope. If you are bringing soil in to make a slope, settlement becomes an issue, revegetating slope becomes an issue. So our design standards for roads actually does specify that a 3-to-1 fill slope is your steepest slope you can have in a fill situation, and a 2-to-1 would be in a cut situation.
Okay. Let's say
Uh,
it's 2-to-1 is sharp if you're headed off the side of a road and you built it
Yeah,
up.
yep. 2-to-1 is pretty steep, but 2-to-1 is also fairly difficult. Like we've noticed this in development, 2-to-1, that's on the verge of being so steep, it's hard to retain seeds on the soil long enough to germinate, because the first water that
It's like
hits
a
them,
60-degree angle.
yeah, it just washes them off.
Yeah,
A
that's steep.
3-to-1 slope is actually a much better, or a better minimum slope if you're trying to get any kind of native seed to regerminate.
Vegetation.
Yep. So
Do
I
you-
mean, if we were going to say something about that in our ordinance, we would just say, I would say or recommend a 3-to-1 max slope. Yeah.
Do you think that would be helpful? I mean, do you think that might?
It's not going to help our height situation. I really think the height situation is determined a lot by the driveway and also just by the native topography.
Okay. That,
It just-
the 30 feet back and the driveway pretty much determines that.
Yeah.
I got a question. So has this kind of been a problem? Have we got a lot of complaints other than the barn about
No.
this kind of thing?
No, this has never come up until the big house and garage and the barn. And
But
it's
the
just,
city council is concerned enough, they want us to look at
Well,
it.
I think it's largely
Because of the barn,
because
isn't it?
the new homes are going to be in hilly areas.
Yeah, and
right?
they're very, very large,
Yeah.
which kind of, like you said, accentuates some of the problems, like you said with the barn. It's accentuated the bigger it is.
And you're probably not going to see that situation again. I
Probably
mean, it
not.
was on such a large piece of land.
Mhm.
There aren't a lot of large pieces of land like that
Yeah.
where someone wants
Not
to
on a
build
slope.
In the
a
middle,
giant barn in the middle of a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
somebody's gonna build a
So
big thing.
It's an unusual
Yeah.
structure, but
it's really, it's an outlier, I
Okay.
would say.
Okay. I'm just really trying to think if there's anything that we haven't thought of that we should be adding that would improve it at all. And I can't see.
Can
anything.
Jed or Austin talk about the virtues of taking your measurements 6 feet away from the foundations
Mhm.
to determine your average?
we don't do that. We make them do it right at the foundation.
Some of the ordinances had that
Like
provision.
Draper, right?
I'm just
Oh.
trying to
Yeah,
understand.
why would they
Why
do
would
that?
they do that?
Yeah.
They'd either
I could-
allows for a little more play.
I could potentially see why, because they could artificially like put a 2-to-1 slope of grass. They'd have to lay sod, but
Mhm.
right up to the foundation, either going, well, you would want it to fill it up. You wouldn't bring it down to the foundation. You'd be creating a pond right on the edge of your foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only situation I could see that happening is if somebody was trying to cheat the system somehow, and they said, so say the house was 6 feet taller than it needed to be. So 6 feet or 12 feet away from the house, they just put in a 2-to-1 slope of sod up and built it up on their foundation.
Yeah, that's what
I
I
could-
think so too. I think that keeps them from cheating the height by saying, okay, we're gonna go out just a little ways, so you can't just like build the dirt up right against your house, and then when we measure from there, your house fits. But if I go out 6 feet, it's 10 feet higher than it was right there.
So
I can
worthwhile
Yeah,
I
I can see why some cities have done that. I've honestly never seen a building permit situation where somebody's tried to do that, though.
Yeah.
But that does seem like something we could do to
appease the demands.
to actually try to tighten it up a little bit, you know?
I feel like we're doing.
Yeah. On our end, on the sign off end,
Uh-huh.
that I think would be, I don't know, I'll just say it, a pain in the butt.
Uh-huh. No, that's
Sure, yeah,
okay.
you could, yeah. It's actually
Hard to
Be a lot of
administrate.
extra work.
Yeah,
it's actually-
Yeah.
yeah.
But that doesn't make that 6 foot offset going that wouldn't have changed.
It wouldn't
either-
change the
it wouldn't
view.
have Either changed either of those two cases, right?
No,
No,
wouldn't.
No, right.
no.
Those
Okay.
2 cases still would have happened.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you said, it would make for
Well-
such a ugly landscape that the likelihood of someone doing that is, although you can't dictate ugly, right? We already know we don't
Yeah,
have the
legislate
ugly
ugly.
ordinance. No, can't legislate ugly.
Yeah.
Don't put that in, Marla.
I mean,
no.
we're already lower. I mean, all of these other cities around here,
Mhm.
like 35 feet, we're
Yeah.
34.
And we have
And- and
12%
we have-
slope,
and
not
we have a-
15.
Yeah, we have a shorter driveway or a lower slope driveway.
I think we've got a great ordinance.
So I think, you know, unless anybody feels like we've come across something that we should add, I mean, you know, let me ask Jed and Austin, do you feel like, if we left it the same, would you be disappointed and feel like that we, you know, you need us to do more?
Honestly, I think what we have is the best already, and I would be disappointed if we changed it and made it a pain for, and
Okay.
more work on both the
Okay.
builders and staff's end to try to regulate it.
Yeah,
Honestly-
after all the research I've done, we really
Yeah.
we see eye to eye with a lot of other hillside communities.
Okay.
And the things that we're not doing that others
Yeah.
are just create extra work. and stuff,
Right.
so.
It does seem bountiful. Maybe it was their planning commission that are like, okay, well, let's
really.
draft off this language.
Yeah, and it, like he said, who knows how old it is, because he said they haven't done anything for a long time, so.
It hasn't guided their
Yeah. Yeah.
decisions for a long time.
One thing that I feel good about is you guys did a lot of research, and I feel like we've had a really thorough discussion. Honestly, I'm surprised that I'm back to where we're at right now. I really thought I would see something that showed that we could make changes to improve it. And that's kind of where my mindset was when we started this, especially after the tour. But
Yeah.
having gone through your research and reading through this, I changed, and I really feel like there isn't anything to add to it.
But it's hinged largely on the driveway.
I think we have a
slope.
big enough hinge on that. I think that I think
Driveway
that is
really
a
It's a big
control.
factor.
We have,
So
yeah, our
now
control
what
is in
about- What
place.
about the case, Jane, where
It
the
goes down.
slope goes, is high on low,
Mhm,
and it's a really big house,
right. So they,
and the driveway is on the uphill side, and let's say the driveway is even pretty steep.
Mhm.
Let's say it's like 10% or
Mhm, yeah.
7%.
they can
you
still
could-
bring in fill on the other side.
And that could be pretty big.
They could bring in as much fill as they needed, but it's highly unlikely someone is going to make the downhill side higher than this side over here.
Oh, no, it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't, but I'm just saying, if that road was pretty steep,
Mhm.
you could have a pretty big.
Significant build on
side.
that side.
on that
Mhm.
side.
Mhm.
And in that
Your retaining
regard,
wall is limited to 9 feet.
the
Mhm.
retaining wall ordinance would limit
That's what's gonna limit
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the
Well,
retaining wall
So they
ordinance.
can only go up 9 feet and then they
Mhm.
have to go
Okay.
in another 9 feet.
And the
then
other
up another
thing
9
is the control of the water, the slough off of the water would control a little bit too. That's good thinking, I
Yeah.
think, to consider those.
Yeah.
But like you said, that with the
'Cause
retaining wall ordinance,
I know it's kind of.
the driveway slope,
They were talking about, well, height of building,
Yeah.
not
the
I'm pretty sure
water
the Hartley's
retention.
Retaining wall is
I
taller
don't know,
than 9
sometime
feet.
maybe kind of, because.
I'm sure.
Let's not comment. I think it's
Accessory
ginormous.
buildings. A little more.
Well, like.
I
so
don't
that
know.
one, like, to me, that the whole thing is, it should have been commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Should have been saying, this is. a
Yeah,
commercial building.
Probably.
So
Can't be
we're-
built in a residential zone.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a motion.
I move to recommend that city continue with the existing heightened grading ordinances as currently written and find that no changes are recommended at this time.
We have a motion by John McKay. Do we have a second?
I second that
A
emotion.
second by Jeff Davis. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
So you're talking about just the height of the ground. We're talking about ground heights or heights of buildings. We're not, because,
We're just talking about leaving the
right.
height and grading requirements for lots.
Lots. this
We're
is-
not talking about anything
Right.
else, just the height and grading requirements for lots.
Right, and we can address heights of accessory
be-
buildings and.
that would be a
different-
separate-
Those are
Yeah.
separate. Mhm. Okay, that's a good point.
Okay.
This is the lot only. This is not
Yeah.
talking about building height.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that passes unanimously. All right, the next item we have on our agenda is we have some cleanup of, we need communications first. So communications. Do we have anything, Austin?
So one thing, so we've been working with the city attorney and we're trying to set up a training
Right.
with the ombudsman. We originally wanted to do that for the first meeting in February, but
Mhm.
the ombudsman doesn't have availability
Okay.
that day. So we're trying to set something up, but right now it's looking like that's most likely going to happen in March.
Okay,
So
Thank
just be
you.
aware that we're probably.
that was
we're
really
gonna
beneficial when we
schedule a
did that
training
before,
In
so
March.
that was great.
And-
Do we have a specific subject we're asking them to look at?
Well, so two things, it's gonna be public, what do they call it? Public meeting kind of etiquette,
Mhm.
like you can't.
The rules of
Rules of-
order.
Like the rules of order.
Okay.
So part of it will be on Robert's Rules of Order and the
Okay.
other part of it will be kind of on the Public Meetings Act, which is
Okay.
a state
Great.
rules and regulations. So
Okay.
on those two things.
I was gonna comment that you can have them come if we feel like we don't understand something really well. So like another time we had them come, it's been several years, but it was on, it was like land use, private versus public.
Yeah.
Kind of like zone changes, things like that.
Mm.
And so if there's a particular subject, we feel like we're not educated enough on zone changes, amendments, to whatever, we can ask for training on that specific thing. So that's always good to keep in mind. The ombudsman seems to be really
Yeah,
willing
and
if they can
we can
schedule
definitely
it.
do more training. So this doesn't have
Yeah.
to be the only one that we do. If we,
Sounds like a good start, though.
So that will be in March.
yeah.
Most likely.
Yeah,
It's not
so
for
most
sure set,
likely-
right?
No, we don't have a date yet, but
Okay.
I'll try and let you all know through email.
Okay.
When we have a date pinned down.
Okay. And our next meeting is in 2 weeks?
In 2
I haven't looked at
weeks,
my
which
schedule.
is
Or is it
February
3
1st.
Do we have a fifth? So is it in 3 weeks?
No, we
Okay.
don't have a fifth Tuesday.
Just a fifth Sunday?
It gives you the illusion because we have like 5 weeks in
Yeah,
a month. but
Right, not on a
it's really
Tuesday.
not. Yeah.
Okay, so the next meeting's February 1st.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
Can you give us a preview of what we might be seeing in February?
Do you know
Um,
yet, or?
So I know for sure one thing that, well, and Jed can probably has more to say to this, but we will be seeing some amendments to our street ordinance,
Mhm.
specifically having to deal with
Street
the
names?
road width.
No,
We're,
okay.
we're looking at Canyon Crest. So there's a project that we have to,
Okay.
we want to get approved
Okay,
through MAG. And
Mhm.
so as part of that, we're going to have to make some changes to our ordinance.
okay,
So that'll be coming in February.
Okay.
So we could be reading up on that if we wanted to
Yeah,
be
so that would
prepared.
be good to read up on that. And then I'm trying to think, what else do we have coming? Can you think of anything else, Jed? It seems like there's something I'm forgetting.
I can't remember either.
You
Off the
can
top of my-
email us if you think of something. I
Yeah.
think Jeff brings up
There's
a really
another
good
topic,
point.
but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think though Jeff's point is really, really good, that giving us a little bit of notice of subjects that would be good to
Yeah.
look into as to what's coming
Yeah,
up.
rather than feeling the stress over the weekend going, oh, okay, I got to make sure I read that. So-
Right, because it
so
is
I
a
don't show
short
up Tuesday
notice.
and going, oh, yeah, I didn't do anything. And
Don't know
so-
what you're talking about.
So, mostly just in preparation for like, with the city council. I mean, I know they just barely met, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
what
we'll
the-
try and
what
do
the
a better
city- What
job
the
of,
city council is thinking, or things that are.
yeah, things that they're looking at.
Things that are coming. I know we've talked about, there's going to be some development questions coming this spring, probably. So,
yeah.
And we did talk about, at one point, we talked about having a brief 5-minute review of the previous city council meeting so that we felt in the loop if people weren't able to.
oh, yeah, I was
You
going
know,
to ask that.
Maybe do
because-
like a
think that would
recap
be-
of the
Because
Yeah,
previous city
they,
I
council
think
meeting.
that would
they
be
passed
helpful.
the sign thing. Or
So,
what-
yeah.
That was, yeah, so, rather
And
than
it's
having to
it's probably
listen.
interesting to see if your stuff goes on,
Right.
or gets
Yeah, so-
approved the way you
So if we
recommend it, right?
could, yeah, if we could have just a recap
Yeah.
each week of city council,
Yeah,
that would
well,
be really
let's-
helpful.
Yeah, I'll plan on
Okay.
preparing more of a
Yeah.
recap for you guys in the
Yeah.
Okay,
future.
that would be good, because I saw they had things that they were voting on that we had talked about over
Right.
the last couple of months,
Yeah.
and I didn't get.
And you're
to-
not always free to
You
listen.
I
didn't watch
didn't
a
get to
3.5 hour
listen to
meeting?
it, so I'm like, did they just
Yeah.
throw that out the
Yeah.
door?
And I always try to at least be on the Zoom call or ask one of us to be on the Zoom call. So if they
Oh,
ask us
okay.
what we need to know,
Oh,
But-
okay.
but I don't always stay the whole time,
Okay.
so.
But it was good to have Jane at the last meeting. She gave some important feedback regarding some of the topics on the agenda. So I thought that was good to have her.
Yeah.
Oh, like,
The sign.
okay.
The sign stuff, yeah.
Okay.
But, another thing, so the legislative session is starting right now.
Mhm.
And so we might be seeing some stuff come out of that
Yeah.
might come to planning commission.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know, but I'll keep my ears,
Okay.
we'll
Yeah,
be
I
finding
mean,
more out in the
I
next
can't
coming weeks.
believe- I
That
mean,
goes
there
for
was-
6 weeks.
It
So,
was like 300 bills that people submitted.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
How would you like their job?
In fact, I think it's even more than 300.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a lot.
it was a
Yeah, we'll see what
ridiculous
shakes
number.
out of it. So you get some really wild proposals in there, and
Mhm.
sometimes the really wild ones, you hope they don't move on, but some of them do. And so we'll keep
Sometimes
an
it
eye on
affects
that and
the
let you
city.
know.
All right, well, let's take a look at the approval of the planning commission minutes. Now we're jumping back to November 16th. Remember, we had some missing from that date, so we didn't want to approve those till we had the full content in, and then we have January 4th.
I got confused as I was reading through them. It looked like city council minutes were kind of blended together. Is I just missing the segue or?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about, but
The city
Let's
council
just look
minutes were
through.
blended into it.
I think it's the motions. Oh, don't tell me we got the city council.
Yeah, I
didn't-
mean, sometimes there are recaps in there that are kind of confusing because if it
Let's see.
talks about what,
It talks about a joint field trip.
the joint field trip, that was a city council meeting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
But-
that was-
but the planning
We
commission
were
did
invited, so
participate
we
in
were
that
Right,
meeting.
but
It's not our
still,
minutes to approve.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not our minutes to approve.
Yeah,
So when you do make the approval, you should just approve the planning commission minutes from the November 16th and the planning commission minutes, if there were any other changes that anyone saw.
Was there a specific, it was just that we were missing
the last like
We were
30
just-
minutes or
okay,
something.
yeah.
Marla had been away and hadn't prepared them yet. for us to-
Yeah, Marla,
they got-
it was like the perfect storm. Marla had surgery and then she got COVID and then, it was just like a never ending stream of bad
Yeah.
things happening. So, but yeah, we got the minutes all here now. So
Okay, so we have a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes for November 16th, 2021 and January 4th, 2022 of the Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, we have a motion by John McKay. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
A second by Ethan Allen. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And a motion to adjourn.
I motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Motion by Ethan Allen and a second by John McKay. All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.